everybody, and welcome to another top 10 video. Today we're going to be talking about something that has been discussed in the Star Wars community a lot, and that is the anthology films. So for those of you who might not know exactly what the anthology films are, they're basically spin-off movies like Rogue One and the upcoming Han Solo movie. So basically having these anthology films allows Disney and Lucasfilm to tell stories set in the Star Wars universe that are not a part of the episodic films and the main storyline. It allows them a lot more flexibility in the kinds of stories that they can tell. A lot of people have been talking about what sort of anthology film they would like to see next, and there have been a lot of other lists about all the different ones. Some of them I agree with some of the movies on their list, some of them I don't, and today we're going to be talking about the 10 that I do want to see. So very quickly before we get started, I just want to say, if you agree with some of the films on this list, go ahead and leave a comment down below telling me what you would like to see from that film, and if you have some that you want to see that aren't on this list, go ahead and tell me what those are down in the comments, and tell me what you'd like to see from those and why you'd like to see those, because I'm very interested in hearing other people's ideas about what they'd like to see. So as usual, I do have an honorable mention that I would just quickly like to talk about, and that is a movie based around the formation of the Rebel Alliance. Personally, I think this would be a kind of interesting movie to see that could start very shortly after Revenge of the Sith, and sort of explain how the Rebel Alliance came to be, who really started it, and all of that sort of thing. The only problem with that is that we already have Rogue One, which is a very rebel-centric movie, so I don't really think we need another one, but at some point in the future I would not be opposed to seeing a movie like this, because if done well, it could be a very interesting movie. Now we're going to get into the actual list. So at number 10 I have a movie about the war between the Jedi and the Sith. So this movie came to me while I was thinking about what I wanted to put on this list and coming up with ideas for different movies that might be included, and while I was doing that I thought of one of the lines from The Phantom Menace that Ki-Adi-Mundi said, where he says that the Sith have been extinct for a millennia at that point. And I think it would be really interesting to see why they've been extinct for such a long time, and I think that could also potentially be a good place to bring in stuff like the Rule of Two, which was established by Darth Bane, and this would also be a good place to see some really great action between the Jedi and the Sith. And I know we've gotten a lot of Jedi action in the prequels, but I think it would be interesting to see something similar to what is in the Old Republic cinematic trailer, specifically the one called Deceived, where we see a whole bunch of Jedi and a whole bunch of Sith just fighting. And even though I know that we have gotten a lot of battle scenes with the Jedi in them in the other Star Wars movies, this would be a little different, since in the movies, most of the time when it was a Jedi versus a Sith, it was like 1 or 2 Jedi against 1 or 2 Sith. And it was very small scale battles, but in this we'd be able to get like an army of Jedi versus an army of Sith. And I think that would be really cool to see. So overall, even though we have gotten a lot of Jedi-related action in the prequels, I still think it would be interesting to see this, because it does seem like it would be a very integral part of Star Wars history, and I think it would make for a pretty cool movie. Next up at number 9, we actually have a story that has been told in other Star Wars media, but not yet in a film, and that is the story of The Force Unleashed. The Force Unleashed has one of my favorite stories in really any Star Wars thing, whether it be the movies or the books or the games, and I think it's a really cool story, and a very unique story as well, seeing as how it's about Darth Vader's apprentice. And I think that would be a cool thing to see, even though if it is faithful to the original story, we would pretty much know what is going to happen anyway if you played the game or read the book or any of that. But even still, even if it is exactly the same thing as the original story, it would be really cool to see it put on film. And I think if they were to do this, it would be a much better way of showing how the rebels were formed rather than having a movie just about that, because if you don't know The Force Unleashed, basically as the story progresses, the Rebel Alliance ends up getting formed because of the actions of Darth Vader's apprentice. And I think the way they did that was really cool, and I think that would be a good way to introduce the formation of the Rebels in a movie. So even though we've heard the story of The Force Unleashed before, I think it would make for a really cool movie and a good experience for anybody who hasn't actually experienced the Force Unleashed story before. So that's number 9. So next up we have a movie centered around Order 66. Now I think something like this would be interesting because it would take a deeper look at an event that we've already seen in the episodic film, specifically episode 3 in this case. I just think that this would be a cool event to sort of take a better look at rather than just having it focused on for a minute or two in Revenge of the Sith. Because even though we did get a decent look at it in the movie, it would still be kind of cool to see a little bit more of the clones' perspective on it, and if some of them actually disagreed with the Order. So, movie about Order 66 is number 8. Number 7 is something that I thought would actually be a bit higher up than it is, but it sits here at number 7, and that is a movie focused on the very, very early days of the Star Wars universe. I'm not talking about, like, being as early as, like, cells, and that's all there is, but I am talking about the formation of the Republic and things like the discovery of the Force and how the Jedi Order began, how the Sith began. And I think this would be a really interesting and unique take on the Star Wars universe, because chances are it would be incredibly different from anything that's been done before. Chances are there wouldn't be any sort of laser weapons in this, that people would still be using like bullets or something, or maybe like very early experimental laser weapons. And it would be really cool to see the very beginning of the Star Wars universe as we know it. And I think it would be a really unique movie to make, and it would be really interesting, so that's why it's on the list. Now, number 6 is a movie that I really was not interested at all in seeing until I saw Rogue One, and that is a Darth Vader centric movie. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking: the original trilogy is about Darth Vader, prequel trilogy is about Anakin Skywalker turning to Darth Vader, so why do you want a Darth Vader movie? And I shared this opinion as well before I saw Rogue One, but that one scene at the end, you probably know what I'm talking about, when Darth Vader just starts killing rebels and everything, made me want to see a movie about Darth Vader in between episodes 3 and 4. Yes, it would be a little bit repetitive since we've gotten so much Darth Vader before, but I think it would be cool to see him hunting down some of the remaining Jedi and fighting the rebels alongside the Empire. And I do think it would be cool to get a deeper look at Darth Vader as a character. The reason for that is because, yes, the original trilogy did show some of Darth Vader's character, especially in Return of the Jedi, but I think it would be really interesting to see what his character is like just after Revenge of the Sith, how he adjusts to becoming Darth Vader, how he adjusts to the suit, and the massive change that's happened in his life. Because I mean, the Jedi have been almost completely made extinct, his wife died, he got all burnt up and put into this Darth Vader suit, and I think it would be interesting to see how he responds to all that and how his character changes from being a little bit more of a Jedi sort of character to just a ruthless killer like we saw in Rogue One. So even though we have gotten Darth Vader a lot before, I think this would be very interesting to see, so that's why it's on the list. Next up at number 5 is one that a huge number of people have been asking for, and that is an Obi-Wan Kenobi film. Now, I do understand some of the criticisms for this idea being like, in between episodes 3 and 4, Obi-Wan just sits in a desert planet. What does he do there? It seems kind of boring. But it would be kind of cool to get a very small-scale Star Wars movie like this, where Obi-Wan's just kind of developing as a character, rather than something like the other Star Wars movies where it's a lot of action and adventure and also still character development, but make this movie completely focused on character development and Obi-Wan's story. And again, like the Darth Vader movie, I think it would be kind of cool to see how Obi-Wan responds to the events of Episode 3, such as Order 66 and the rise of the Empire and losing his best friend and pretty much almost killing him. And I think that would be really interesting to see, just being able to have a look at Obi-Wan's development as a character. And as for the actual events that would happen in the film, maybe just him helping out the locals or just watching over Luke. I think it would be cool to get a Star Wars movie that is completely focused on a character's development over time, and I think Obi-Wan would be a perfect character for that sort of story. Next up, we've got another more unique sort of movie, and that is one focused on a clone or stormtrooper squad. I feel like this could be somewhat similar sounding to Rogue One, since Rogue One is about a small team of characters that goes on this adventure to stop the Empire and all that, but this clone or stormtrooper movie could be focused on a team of like 4 or 5 soldiers, and again, like Rogue One, it could be styled more like a war movie, but this would be a little different in the sense that it could be a little more personal and showcase a little bit more of the interactions that these soldiers have with each other on the battlefield and off it. And I would really like to see something similar to Republic Commando, where it's these soldiers going on missions, bantering back and forth, but also have some really awesome fight scenes. And I think it would be a good movie for character interaction as well as for some really interesting fights. So that's why it is number 4. Next up, we have perhaps one of the most unique movies on this list besides the one about the formation of the Republic and all that, and that would be a movie focused more on the darker side of the Star Wars universe, and by that I mean like a bounty hunter movie or a smuggler movie, a movie about a team of bounty hunters or one bounty hunter. And I know people might be saying, oh, do one about Boba Fett, but I honestly don't see the appeal of Boba Fett all that much. I mean, he's cool, he looks cool, he's kind of an interesting character, I guess, but I don't really get the hype behind having a Boba Fett movie, so I'm not talking about Boba Fett here. But overall, I just think that this would be a cool movie to see. I'd like to see something just so you can sort of more understand what I'm thinking. Something along the lines of what Star Wars 1313 was supposed to be, where it's a much darker, grittier take on the Star Wars universe. You know, maybe a little more violent, not necessarily like tons of blood and gore and all that, but something a little more violent, a little more dark. And I think that would be cool to see, since we haven't really seen that all that much, especially in the movies. I mean, the movies have been dark, but not as dark as this movie could be. So I think it would be really cool to see, and it would be a pretty unique sort of Star Wars movie, so that's why it's number 3. Number 2 is a Darth Maul movie. Now, some people don't get the hype behind this movie because Darth Maul really didn't do very much in the movies, and I know he got a bigger part in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, but I have not seen Clone Wars or Rebels, at least not the parts that he's in, because I have seen like the first season of Clone Wars, but I haven't watched the rest of it, although I am planning to. But he didn't really do that much in the prequels, but that's almost exactly why I want to see a movie about him, because he seems like such an interesting character and a really cool character, but we didn't get to see much of him, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with the prequel trilogy, is that because of them switching villains in every movie, he only lasted for one movie, and even then he only got like 20 minutes of screen time. So I think a movie about Darth Maul's training and him hunting Jedi, or just hunting down people, because I think it might be a little suspicious to the Jedi if just Jedi started dying. But maybe he could like pose as a bounty hunter going after Jedi, or maybe he could just be an assassin, a Sith assassin going after, you know, political figures or crime lords or any of that sort of thing that would expand upon his training. And I just think that would be kind of cool to see, so that's why he's on the list. Finally, we arrive at number 1, and those of you who know me and know the sort of content I've done on this channel before probably know what this is, since it hasn't been on the list yet, and that is an Old Republic movie. Now, by mentioning the Old Republic, I do not mean the Old Republic as in what I had earlier, where it's the very early stages of the Star Wars universe. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something like the Old Republic timeline in the expanded universe, like the Old Republic games and the books and all that sort of thing. Something where the Jedi were truly in their prime, because they were supposed to be in their prime in the prequels, but by the end of episode 2 their numbers had significantly decreased because of the Battle of Geonosis. So I think something showing the real prime of the Jedi and the prime of the Sith would be really cool to see, plus I just love the Old Republic era. And this movie would also be a great opportunity for Lucasfilm and Disney to bring back some fan favorite characters from non-canon back into canon, such as Revan or Bane or other ancient Sith that people love. They could even go as far as having this be an adaptation of the Knights of the Old Republic storyline, and showing things like the Mandalorian Wars, or the Jedi Civil War, and the story of Revan and the Jedi Exile, and all of that sort of thing. And because of the huge amount of content there is to draw from in the Old Republic, they could even stretch it out into a film trilogy, which might be pushing it a little bit. I think for the most part they want to stick to just singular films, but if they wanted to do a trilogy about the Old Republic, they definitely could. I think that a movie centered around the Old Republic would be really cool, just because of the amount of lore and stories that can be told through it. And it would also be a good opportunity to bring back some characters that many Star Wars fans already know and love, and I think it would be kind of cool to see that, and so that is why it is at the number 1 spot. So anyways guys, thank you very much for watching. What did you think of my list? Do you agree with some of the films I listed? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more Star Wars content. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you always.